Candidate number 3. According to section 16.12 of the bylaws of our WMC, before a lodge can be granted their charter, they must provide proof of its members' skill and ability to perform the work, including the conferring of the 3 degrees. Today, there are lodges in our jurisdiction that can no longer fulfill this requirement. Do you believe this is a problem? If so, what solutions can you propose?
Well, I mentioned in a previous question that we have a number of lodges. I think we need to take a survey of a number of lodges that are not viable. And let me say what my definition of not viable is. And I'll use the example of Twin Falls. Twin Falls was in a small town called Groux-Holt. And when we decided to merge that with Silver Star Lodge in District 19, Groux-Holt was at one time a big timber town. International Paper was there, and pretty much from what I understand from the history of the lodge, if you wanted to be in management in International Paper in that particular mill, you were a Mason, and the Masonic Lodge was jumping. And the reality is that the community just couldn't support the lodge anymore. And so you had old members who were coming and just kind of going through the motions, which is what I think happens when you lose the proficiency in the ritual, is the fact that you don't have the members that you can get to the meetings, and there's no path to making that happen. So that's my first answer from a Grand Lodge perspective, is I think we need to look at those areas of the jurisdiction where the community has moved on for whatever reason, and the area just in itself cannot support a lodge, and so the lodge itself cannot be proficient. They just don't have the members to do that. Maybe the members that are there are doing a fine job, but they can't put on any degrees, and so they become rusty because they can't get enough members in. That's number one. Number two is the fact that we have the Proficiency in Lodge Management program, and that has a component to it that obviously there's a component looking at the code, and there's a component looking at the constitutions, etc. There's also a component that is about ritual. And in one of a recent question that was published in the Tribune, we were asked specifically, as people have put their name in for the Junior Grand South, what we would do to encourage that without making it mandatory. And again, going back to my idea of being kind of a believer in small Grand Lodge, I don't think it should be mandatory, but I do believe that we can get the proficiency of those viable lodges back up by doing, what I talked about of having more education and kind of a strict observance look at the lodge so that it becomes meaningful in context of what the lodge does. Second of all, making the proficiency in lodge management something that can be done in stages and is recognized by a lot of our members. Really like the idea of getting a pin or a medal or something like that. My proposition for this was to have it in 3 stages. Number 1 is to have where you learn the essentials. Number 2 is the ritual, and number 3 is kind of the full boat.
10 seconds.
So I think that's a couple of ways that we can fulfill that.
Candidate number 1, same question.
Would you read that question over again and clarification in a way?
Yes. According to section 16.12 of the bylaws of our WMC, before a lodge is granted its charter, they must provide proof of its members' skill and ability to perform the work, including the conferring of the 3 degrees. Today, there are lodges in our jurisdiction that can no longer fulfill this requirement. Do you believe this is a problem? If so, what solutions do you propose?
I believe this is a problem, but I don't think that the solution is to make everybody become proficient in doing the degrees. You have many men coming into this fraternity today that are Masons because they were made a Mason in their heart to begin with. They're not ritualists. And some people just cannot do the ritual per se, but that doesn't mean that they're not a viable asset to a lodge. They may be good at putting on dinners and so on. They bring other attributes to the lodge besides being a ritualist. And I think, again, this is where we are falling down as Masons, because we're not finding out what these men are looking for when they join the fraternity. You know, what is it that drives them? Some people want to learn more about the fraternity from a history and esoterical viewpoint. They want to get into the books. Others want to do the ritual. Then work with those guys, make them the leaders of the lodge. But don't take everybody and say, hey, you know, if you're going to become master of the lodge, you got to become you got to be a ritualist. No, there's many a Mason out there that's a good leader, a good organizer, a good facilitator. We're not all ritualists. Those that are, God bless them. But there's other men out there that are good Masons. There's men out there that'll make good Masons, but may not be those that want to do the ritual. And if we're going to survive, we got to work on that, because in order to keep members coming to your lodge, you got to give them something to do. Those lodges that are surviving today are those lodges that have a goal, they have a reason for existing, they're involved in their communities, and they're doing things. How do you do that? By having members that want to do those things. If you have those members, put them to work doing that. Don't require they become a ritualist. I believe in the proficiency in lodge management. Some people will get into it because that's what they want, but I don't believe it's mandatory. It's a learning tool. Thank you.
Candidate number 2, same question.
I think I would rephrase the question just a bit. It's not clear from the question the deficiency in the ability of a lodge to confer degrees,
Yes.
or is the problem really a deficiency in some lodges in simply doing the work that they're supposed to be doing? And they're related, not necessarily the same thing. In the eastern part of our jurisdiction, there are lodges that are frankly, as was mentioned, are just too small to field a full team to do a degree. So what happens is 2 or 3 of the lodges get together and they have their degree team and they do the degrees. It's not that they're not proficient, it's just not a number of bodies. You'll find that many of the members belong to 3 and 4 lodges in those districts. On the other hand, you do have lodges where they do have sufficient bodies, but they don't have the skills to confer the degrees. And I don't think I will state that the majority of the lodges don't have all the places and all the skill positions that they can fill out of their lodges. Is that a problem? I would prefer to think of it as an opportunity. I don't like the word problem anyway. If you have to call in someone to do the lecture on a particular degree, okay. Did the candidate get the lecture? Yes. Is there someone in the lodge willing to step forward to learn the lecture so you don't have to call someone in? That's the key. So we need to encourage our brothers, as I said to some of these other questions, is we need to encourage our brothers to step up and be part of the fraternity in the sense that they're taking on some of our labors. And membership issues, we don't keep our members busy. We go have our stale donut and our cold coffee and call it good once a month. Well, that's not enough. So this is just an example of how we need to involve our members and use this as a stepping stone to start improving our lodges, both from a fellowship and also the proficiency will take care of itself.